What's up everyone? I'm Matt with Ozark Overland Adventures, and in this video we're going to talk about recovery gear. I think recovery gear is just an absolute must if you're going to get into overlanding and off-roading, especially being in remote locations, off the grid. You just have to have recovery gear. It's not a matter of if you're going to get into a situation. It's really a matter of when, because terrain changes each year based on weather. Conditions for a trail when it's dry are radically different than conditions for a trail when it's wet, and you just never know. And so having recovery gear is a must. And if you were going to go out and not have recovery gear, then at the very minimum, please wheel with people that do. So that if you're in a situation and you get hung up, you get caught in a mud hole, you slide off the road because of snow or ice or whatever, you've at least got friends that have recovery gear that can help you out. Now, I'm going to reiterate, you need your own recovery gear, because we have been in situations, we will with large groups of friends sometimes, and we have actually been in situations where a friend of mine got hung up on a trail. It was on a steep hill, and if he had not had his own recovery gear, it would have been very difficult for us to recover him, just because of the angle of the hill and the steepness of it and all that sort of stuff. It would have been very challenging for us to do that recovery had he not had his own recovery gear. So get your own recovery gear. If you're going to take this overlanding, off-roading stuff seriously, please make sure you have recovery gear. Now, what I'm going to do is walk through what my wife and I have, because my wife and I have our own rigs. That's my wife's, this one's mine, and walk you through the recovery gear that we carry with us. I'm even going to talk about some gear that I have, but I don't take with me. But I do have it, and I'm not going to get rid of it because it does serve a specific purpose for when we are in specific environments that we don't normally get into. So I'll get into that, but I'll just start by kind of walking at the front and what I think are basic recovery options, and then we'll discuss, and I'll give you some tips and tricks and some things that I've learned along the way about storing your recovery gear and that sort of stuff. So here we go. We're going to start at the front here because I think this is really one of the most necessary and foundational pieces of recovery equipment that you need on your rig. Now, there are some people that will disagree with me in the comments, and that is totally fine. We all have our own opinions. But I think a winch, a solid bumper with a winch is I think is the foundation for your recovery equipment. There are people that say you need a tow strap and some D-rings, and with that you can get out of most things. Well, I tried that. My very first trip out, my very first off-roading trip outside of the state, went to New Mexico over Labor Day weekend and spent 4 days there wheeling. Bone stock, my very first Jeep, a 2012 Wrangler Sahara. My very first Jeep, a bone stock 2008 Jeep Wrangler Sahara. And I had nothing. It was completely stock. But before the trip, I thought, you know what? I should probably get a tow strap and maybe some D-rings to attach them, and just in case we get in trouble. Well, me and my then brother-in-law were on a trail just east of Taos, New Mexico, on a Forest Service road. Took an optional line that had a hump on it right in the middle of it, and so I took that and boom, got high centered. Perfectly high centered, all four tires spinning. I think I've got a little video of it here still from that day, but all four tires spinning. But I had my tow strap, but there was nobody around to attach that tow strap to. We were all alone in the national forest, and nobody ever came by. So we had to get creative. We used the jack to jack up a couple of the wheels, and found some rocks and stacked some rocks enough that we could get enough traction to get over it. It took us a long time to do that recovery. And as soon as I got home, I bought a bumper and a winch. That was the very first thing I did. But a winch is, I think, the start and the foundation of a good recovery system. Now, my wife and I both use these winches by Overland. They're their Panther Series 2 winch. They are not an expensive winch at all, for under $500, sometimes even under $400 when they're on sale. You can get what I think is a good quality winch. Does it come from China? Yes, it does. But I took a chance. I had a Warren winch for a number of years, and it left me stranded in Moab on Pritchett Canyon. It left me dangling about 15 to 20 feet from the top of the very last obstacle on Yellow Hill, and it just died. Just left me hanging there. Luckily, a friend of mine went first, and he turned around and winched me the rest of the way up. So after that, I decided to take a chance with this new company called Overland, and been running this for a little over a year now, and I am crazy impressed with it. It has served me incredibly well. I've got the 13,000-pound version on my Gladiator. My wife has the 9,500-pound version on her Wrangler. We have both used these in recovery situations, and they work very, very well. I love the fact that they come with synthetic line. I know there's a lot of debate on the whole synthetic versus steel argument. If you are wheeling in rocks a lot, or just have a dedicated rock crawler rig, I think steel cable is probably a good idea, because the synthetic line can get cuts and abrasions on rocks. But for an overland rig, and for the safety aspect of it, for the weight savings of it, I think synthetic is the way to go. It's so much easier to handle. I've had steel cable before. I will never go back to steel. I just think synthetic is the way to go. It's so much easier to deal with. There's very little safety risk with synthetic line. Because of the kinetic energy that steel cable stores. If that snaps, it becomes a dangerous, deadly weapon. Synthetic can also snap. It can store some kinetic energy, but for the most part, when it snaps, it falls. It doesn't slingshot things back at you as a deadly projectile. Not saying it can't happen, just the odds are much, much, much less. I'm not going to go on record saying that synthetic is perfectly safe, because any recovery situation is risky. So that's why we choose synthetic. Safety, weight. It's just so much easier to handle and deal with. It does require maintenance. If you are recovering out of muddy situations and it gets dirt and gets grit and stuff in there, you do need to periodically soak it in a bucket of water and work the fibers and get as much debris as you can out of it, just to prolong the life of your synthetic line. Now, I've heard some people talk about the UV damage on synthetic. You need a cover for it and all that sort of stuff. I've been using synthetic for years. Never had an issue with it. Not saying it can't happen. Not saying that's not valid. But I've never experienced anything like that. So I'm not sure that the whole UV degradation of the synthetic line is really enough to worry about. So you can fight me with that in the comments. That's fine. I don't care. But I think a winch is critical for the foundation of your recovery equipment. Now, you'll notice two differences between mine and my wife's winches, other than the weight rating, and that is how we have our fair leads set up. I am using this groove fair lead for Kinetic ropes. I love this thing. What this does is allows me to have a complete metal-less solution in my recovery. So I don't have any heavy hooks here. I don't have any thimbles or anything like this connected to my rope, so that in the case that a failure happens, there's nothing heavy attached to this that will slingshot back. So I love this. You just take this, you connect it to a soft shackle, you connect it to your tree strap, and there's no metal involved. And I've used this and I absolutely love it. And this fair lead allows you to keep that out of the way. I can, if need be, if I bump into a rock, if I bump into a tree, while I'm out wheeling, nothing's going to get damaged here on my fair lead or my winch line. My wife is going a little more traditional route. She has a Factor 55 Ultra hook. And these things are great. One thing I do love about these is with the hook attachment, it makes it super quick and easy. So if you need to, just hook this up to a tree strap, boom, you're done. Hook it up to a D-ring, boom, you're done. And it does make it very, very fast. But this, if you hit this on a rock, there's potential for damage. It does have some weight to it. And so she loves the Ultra Hook. I love the Groove Fairlead. It's really all about personal choice. But that's, my wife loves that one. And I love the Groove Fairlead. I can't say anything negative about either one of them. They both work. They're just have different pros and cons. I definitely think if your winch came with just a cheap basic hook, replace that. Absolutely replace that. I don't like those. I don't trust them. I don't think they're made well. Get either something like the Groove Fairlead that I have that removes all of that sort of stuff, or get a quality thimble or recovery attachment for your winch, like a Factor 55 thimble, Ultra Hook, any of those options. I think are fantastic. So if you're still rocking the cheap metal hook that came with your winch, I would definitely get rid of that. Okay, so you got your winch. What else do you need? Because a winch by itself doesn't do a whole lot of good unless you have the necessary equipment to go with it. My number one tip for your recovery gear, no matter what you have, is to make it easily accessible. Do not bury it under a seat. Do not store it in the back of your rig so that if you get in a situation you can't easily access it. Make sure your recovery gear is easy to access it. So for that, I keep mine right here in this Apache case, mounted on the side of my rig. Unless I somehow pin myself against a tree here, this is always easily accessible. Now in here, I have got a couple soft shackles. This is one from Treaty Oak. It's got this rubberized stuff on the fibers, and then it's wrapped here. Very nice soft shackle. It has served me quite well. But it's I like it. I also carry a couple extra ones in here. These are ones that I made these. I had an old winch line, and so I took the good parts of the winch line and actually created my own soft shackle. Not saying I recommend doing that, because there's definitely some risk involved, but I've used these on a bunch of recoveries now, and done really well. So I carry a total of 3 soft shackles, 2 of my homemade ones, and this nice one from Treaty Oak. My wife bought this for me a number of years ago for, I think, a stocking stuffer or something. And then in here I have my tree strap, which probably needs to be replaced, but you gotta have a tree strap. It is really bad. It's just a really bad idea to take your winch line and wrap it around a tree. That will get people pissed off really fast. So, but this goes around the tree. It protects the bark. You don't damage the tree, and serves as a solid anchor point for when you're in a recovery situation. And makes a fairly nice extension as well if you're maybe tugging someone out and maybe just need a little bit longer reach. Makes a good extension as well if needed. I use this a lot when I'm pulling down trees out of the way. I wrap this around it to get a good grip, and then do it. That stays right here, and my soft shackle stays there. And then something I just picked up at one of the expos this last year that I've used a couple times is this little guy. It is a snatch block for use with synthetic line. I keep a regular snatch block with me as well, but I love how small this is. I love how lightweight this is. This is designed for synthetic, and so there's nothing in here for the line to catch on, and the synthetic line moves freely in that channel. You take your one soft shackle and you put it through. I'm not a fan of this rubberized coating. I know it has its purpose, but I don't like it because it makes dealing with the soft shackles kind of a pain in the butt. But you put this through here, connect that to your anchor point, and then your winch line goes there. and it serves as a good snatch block. And I'm just using this as an example. This is not my winch line. I'm just using this as an example. So don't blast me in the comments here. But that, if you need to either loop it back on yourself to get more recovery power, to get unstuck from a nasty mud hole or up a particular rock obstacle or something, or if you, what I use them for more than anything, because I've never had to loop one back onto myself to gain that extra recovery strength. But I use them to change the angle of the pull. So if I'm in a precarious situation and a straight pull is not ideal, I will take this, angle it to a tree, and to change my direction of pull, and maybe pull me a little bit sideways if I'm maybe off camber or something, and change my angle of pull. That's what I use these for more than anything. So far, I've yet to be in a situation where I had to double the winch pull strength to get me out of something. So, but these are super handy for, for that. And I like that better than a traditional, snatch block. And of course, there's gloves in here because safety. But all of that stays in this very easy to access tote. I've been in a situation with a friend of mine in Moab. All of his recovery gear was stored in the back of his Wrangler, and he got, trying to go up an obstacle on Metal Masher, got wedged in on his tire. So there was no way for him to access his recovery gear, because there was no way he was going to open his back gate to be able to get to him. Now, theoretically, you may be able to climb in the back seat, climb over, fiddle around, move stuff around, and be able to access it. But bottom line is, it wasn't easy to access. So having your gear in an easy to get to location, very important, very critical. Now, I do carry additional recovery gear elsewhere, and my favorite one, this is usually my go-to. I keep right back here in this little side pocket. It fits very nicely right here, and I can access it with my tailgate up if I was ever in that type of situation. But this is my Kinetic recovery rope. I do not remember the brand of this one. I got it a long time ago from a friend of mine, but I absolutely love Kinetic ropes. They are so much better. If you have a friend or you're stuck in a mud hole and maybe you don't have anything to winch off of, and you just want to quickly just attach a strap and pull someone out of a mud hole or off a rock or something like that, a Kinetic rope is so much better than a tow strap, because this is basically a big giant rubber band. And so as you pull, it stretches and you don't get that really hard jolt that can break things. And so it's much better on the recovery process. It's much better on the vehicles. And so highly recommend Kinetic ropes over tow straps for any type of pulling recovery. They just work so much better. They're definitely more expensive, but worth it. Absolutely worth it. Put a Kinetic rope in your recovery kit. I love these. The ones that I recommend, Yankum ropes. They make a fantastic one. We actually gave one away at a recent event that we were at. Open Road 4-wheel drive. I think they have some too. But Kinetic ropes, there's a bunch of companies that make them. Highly recommend this over a tow strap. Now, do I carry a tow strap? Yes, I do. I keep all of my extra little stuff in this wolf pack here. It stays here. It's easily accessible, but it's not as easily accessible as that. But inside this wolf pack, I carry a couple steel D-rings. These do still have their place. I will always go for a soft shackle if I can, but there's some situations where a steel D-ring is necessary. And I carry a traditional snatch block, and this is really why I have the D-rings. And that is because, as you can see, this has a ding in it. And if I take a soft shackle and I wrap it around that's some hard edges. There is potential for this to cut through those fibers and have a failure point at the soft shackle. So for a traditional style snatch block like this, take a take a traditional steel D-ring and use that on the snatch block. Now, I do use this, I have used the snatch block with my synthetic line. It does work. You just have to be extra careful because, you know, with the moving parts in here, you know, it is possible for your line to, you know, fall over into this groove and get pinched and get damaged, that sort of thing. So I keep this as my backup. If I'm ever in a situation where I need to do 2 direction line pulls, you know, I at least have that option. And then I do keep a traditional toe strap back here. Honestly, the only thing I use this for nowadays is if I need an extension on my line, just to maybe to reach a tree that's a better size, or you know, if I'm having to tow a vehicle type of thing, I'll still use my kinetic line because it just makes that a lot smoother. But you do risk damaging it. So these make a great extension. I think this is a 30-foot one, and I like it. It's good to have just your traditional. These are cheap. I think this is also rugged ridge. I'm not sure. I think it came in that kit. But yes, I do carry a basic toe strap, but it very rarely gets used. All right, now let's move over to my wife's Wrangler. I mean, there's not as many options for easily accessing your recovery gear in a Wrangler or an SUV as there is on a, you know, on a pickup truck, because you've got the bed, you got the, you know, possible side mounts, that sort of thing. And so for that, kind of going against everything I've said so far, all of my wife's recovery gear is in this X-Cargo Magellan bag. It keeps it up here out of the way. It doesn't keep it underneath. If need be, you could crawl in the back and access this stuff. But the reason hers is here, and the reason why I'm okay with it, is one, she is not going to be wheeling any hardcore technical trails without someone else there. She's not going to be wheeling technical trails alone. And most of the time I'm going to be there too. So, and guarantee you, she will not be found wheeling in deep mud, because she hates deep mud. She will not take her Wrangler in deep, nasty, sloppy mud holes because she doesn't want to clean it up, and there's, you know, doesn't want the grit and stuff getting in her axles and ball joints and that sort of thing. So she avoids them. This is not a mud vehicle, and so for that, she's not going to have this sunk down in mud and then have to get to this stuff. So in here, very similar situation to mine. She has a couple soft shackles, homemade ones that have worked well. She also has a couple steel D-rings. She has a tree strap. And she does have a very good quality, much better than mine, toe strap that you can see has never been used before. But is there for just in case. And this is kind of like insurance. You hope you never need it, but when you do, you really need it. Let's see, she's got, let's see if there's gloves in here. And then she has a traditional snatch block. I need to get her one of the other ones. Factor 55 makes a great one. ARB makes a great one. That one from Overland Vehicle Systems, I've used it. It's been great. So I do need to get her a synthetic style snatch block, but that's where hers is, and this is where everything of hers is. It's all stored right back here, so she can get to it. Another key piece of recovery gear that I think is really important to have. I have not been in a situation to need one, but that's also because I don't wheel in certain areas, just because of where I am, that Kara doesn't carry with her, and I really need to get one for. That is just a shovel. Now, just the little small, cheap folding shovels will work great. I carry this one. It's one I found off Amazon. It's by a company called Gramfire. But this is a fantastic little shovel. It's got, oops, wrong way. You know, it's got a decent size shovel head. It's got extensions to make the pole longer. It's got a little saw. This is a great little shovel that, like I said, I don't wheel in sand or snow. And that's really the type of environment that a shovel comes in particularly handy for, digging out the snow, digging out the sand from in front of your tires. So I do keep one, but I have yet to be in a situation because of where I wheel to need a shovel. I've never had to use a shovel in a recovery situation, and but if I ever do, I've got one. And I love how small this thing packs down. Fits really nice in my drawer there. Now, you may be wondering, you know, I've gone through this whole video and I have yet to mention traction boards. I do have traction boards. I mean, if you've seen my channel, you know I carry these little mini traction boards on the side of my Jeep, and I honestly never ever have used these for recovery. I use these for leveling my vehicle at camp. That's why they're so small. I don't know that I would actually trust these in a recovery situation because they're so small, but in a pinch, they might work to get out of some snow and stuff. But I do actually own a set of recovery boards, and if you remember when I first got my Gladiator, if you were watching back then, I carried these. These are full-length recovery boards. They're by a company called Action Tracks. They're made in the USA, and this is their higher-end ones. They have the metal studs here just to help with traction because studs you know, can break off if you're spinning on them. And I don't carry these on my Jeep anymore because I carried them for like a year and they never, ever got used. And that's just because of the environment that I wheel in. I have never wheeled in the desert where there's, you know, deep sand and I'm in a situation where there's no trees around to winch off of. Or have been in a situation where there's not another vehicle around to winch off of. And we don't get really any snow here in Arkansas. And so I think traction boards are great options to have if you're wheeling in sand, if you're wheeling in the desert where there's no trees, if you're wheeling in deep snow. I think that's where recovery boards shine. And I just don't wheel in those environments very often. So they live in my garage. I'm not getting rid of them because if I'm in a situation where I will be in snowy conditions, if I will be out in the desert, I want to be able to have that as an option. So, I mean, as far as traction boards goes, highly recommend Action Tracks. Like I said, they're a U.S. company. They're made in the USA. Definitely one of the higher end brands up there with Max Tracks. They're not the cheap Amazon knockoffs. So, but that's why my recovery boards live in my garage because I wheel in environments with trees. So the winch is always going to be my go-to. I see a lot of people using traction boards for mud. As you can see, we have an ample amount of mud here in the Ozarks. But the last thing I want to do is get a set of traction boards buried in the mud, and they do work in mud. They do work in that environment. But the last thing I want to do is get a set of traction boards buried in the mud and then have to dig them out, put them in my rig, and then clean them. I know people that do. That's just doesn't sound fun to me. So that's why I don't use traction boards in mud. If there's mud, there's probably going to be trees. And you know, where I live, there's a bunch of trees. Where we travel, there's a bunch of trees. And so I just prefer winching off trees. It's I think it's a much easier and simpler, and I think a lot of times faster option than using traction boards. Well, I hope this video was helpful to you, at least understanding the recovery gear that we use, why we use it, the situations that they work great in, and even understanding why we don't carry some recovery gear, but the environments that those particular tools are helpful. And just want to reiterate two things. One, have your own recovery gear. If you're going to go out doing this overlanding, off-roading thing, especially if you're going solo, man, have recovery gear and know how to use it. And two, for your recovery gear, make it easy to get to, because we have seen personally situations where recovery gear has not been accessible. We have seen personally situations where if the rig did not have its own winch, the recovery process for that vehicle would have been exponentially harder and more dangerous. So, so have your own recovery gear, know how to use it, keep it in a place that's accessible, and hopefully have an amazing, safe time out on the trails, exploring amazing destinations, and just having a whole lot of fun. So if you would give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, check out our Patreon if you like the content that we're doing and you want to consider supporting us, gain access to special content, special events, all of our GPS data. That link is in the video description below. And for Ozark Overland Adventures merchandise, go to shopoverlandapparel.com. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.